His Excellency, Minister of State for Displaced Affairs, distinguished ambassadors and representatives of UN organizations, AUB President, AUB Provost, and Deans, distinguished guests, faculty, and students. It's a great honor to welcome you today to the AUB4Refugees Forum, the title of which is Innovative Responses to the Syrian Refugee Crisis. The AUB4Refugees initiative began this fall as a university-wide program to bring together AUB faculty and units addressing the impacts of the Syrian refugee crisis. It aims at nurturing cooperation and building partnerships on campus and beyond to deal with the effects of the refugee crisis. The initiative will work for impactful research, community-based teaching, and engaged practice as related to the refugee crisis. The objectives of the initiative are to build synergy among AUB units and faculty engaged in addressing the impact of the refugee crisis, communicate externally and internally about AUB's engagement in the refugee crisis, foster partnerships with national, regional, and international stakeholders, including donors working or interested in alleviating the impact of the refugee crisis, facilitate operational aspects within AUB on projects related to the impact of refugee crisis. In today's forum, we aim to create a platform in which AUB professors and staff will show the ways they are addressing the impacts of the Syrian refugee crisis in relation to the refugees themselves as well as the host communities. We will be showcasing 18 out of the 64 ongoing projects on Syrian refugees from across AUB. So far, at AUB, we have 35 researchers who are conducting projects directly related to the Syrian refugee crisis. And I can tell you that this group of researchers keeps growing. Equally important, the forum will create an opportunity for dialogue on how synergies and partnerships can be built within AUB and with our partners from the government, the UN, and the civil society. Basically, our forum, hopefully all of you got to get the booklet of the forum. The forum will be organized over 4 interdisciplinary sessions addressing the following themes that are related to the refugees and their host communities. First session is on tackling vulnerabilities. The second is on innovation to fend off the crisis. The third is on paving the path for higher education. And the fourth on the way forward for better and innovative policies. It's worth mentioning that in addition to the faculties, the institutes, and the centers, namely the Issam Fares Institute for Public Policy and the Center for Civic Engagement have been significantly active in refugee-related projects and activities. Particularly, the Issam Fares Institute, led by Dr. Tariq Mitri, has been active in policy research and dialogue, and the Center for Civic Engagement and Community Service, led by Mr. Rabia Shibli, has been active in community engagement and service learning. In closure, I would like to deeply thank you and thank our leadership, President Khouri and Provost Harajli, for their vision to establish the AUB4Refugees initiative. Deep thanks to Dr. Nasser Yassin, who spearheaded this initiative, the foundations of which were laid down by Dean Nadia Sheikh and himself. My sincere appreciation for the communications and events management team at AUB for their hard work and willingness to work overtime with short notices to make this forum a reality. Thanks to Issam Fares Institute for supporting this forum in many ways, and many thanks to the AUB4Refugees group of researchers, to our moderators today, and to all my colleagues who are presenting in this forum today. And now I invite President Fadlu Khouri to officially open this forum and deliver some introductory remarks. Thank you.
Good morning, Excellencies, colleagues, friends. I want to thank Minister. Good morning. Perfect timing. I want to thank the government of Lebanon, the NGOs, the United Nations, and all of our colleagues for their support of this important conference. And I especially want to thank Drs. Yassin and Muhtasib for putting this together, and the Provost for having the initiative to understand that we had so many different, disparate, but highly impressive and effective initiatives on the Syrian refugee crisis that it made sense to put it under one forum. So I thought it was ironic but apropos that the Lebanese national anthem was interrupted, because it reminds me that democracy in the Middle East is a status interrupted, and that the fate of Syria is a status that's more than interrupted. It's a major understatement to say that the last 6 years have been especially difficult for Syrian refugees and internationally displaced persons here in the region, but also in Europe and elsewhere. And I think for those of us, and I don't include myself in this group, who have always looked for leadership abroad, I think Mr. Trump's few days have been a firm answer about any possibility of leadership from the United States. I think he's setting records for really immature behavior and irresponsible behavior from a head of state. And I'm going to say that in my controversial role as a university president. I make this point because this is a point that I think I've made my whole life. In Lebanon and in Syria, we have always waited for Big Brother to come from abroad to rescue us. Well, guess what? Mr. Trump's answer has been crystal clear. Big Brother ain't coming, okay? So I think it's time that we got our hands dirty and got down to the path of exactly what this conference is about, which is helping our brothers and sisters in Syria. And this is a message that we intend to transmit as the AUB community everywhere, among Lebanese, among Syrians, among Palestinians, among Americans, and everyone else. There is a unity among our different peoples that it's time for us to step up and accept the responsibility. And I have to say, I'm especially proud of our AUB community for the way that they've done that. But it's been very difficult on the host communities. That I have to acknowledge. Lebanon has faced an unprecedented call for support, and the context is staggering. In my view, Lebanon has been the most hospitable country because it's the smallest country per capita absorbing this many refugees. In addition to the 500,000 Palestinian refugees whose fate we in the international community have never really determined, and we have not really helped them in the long term as an international community in determining their fate. And the 50,000 Iraqi refugees, 1.5 million Syrian refugees by the most conservative estimates are here, meaning that with a native population that optimistically is 4.1 million Lebanese, a third of the population in this country are now refugees. So what do we do about that? What can we expect to do about it, having the highest number of refugees per capita in any nation in the world? One of the things we can do is we can learn from the resilience of the refugees and their host communities. The refugees themselves, aided by the support of partners in the international, national, and local organizations, are attempting to offset the impacts of their displacement. Here in Lebanon, we see how refugees are supporting each other, whether to assist in having better access to health care or in creating self-help mechanisms to run non-formal education centers. Many of you know that we have mobile clinics, we have other facilities, educational and otherwise, to serve these unfortunate individuals in the Beqa in particular. Our greatest concern, though, has to focus on education. At a recent less than satisfactory meeting that I had at the State Department, where the United States reminded me, as if we needed reminding, about how much assistance they are providing to put roofs over people's heads, we made the point that only 4% of these students are in high school or university. 4%. The point that we made is that if they don't have much of a future, and we can talk about opportunities, vocational training, and so on and so forth, how is their society once the war is over, going to rebuild itself. For me, we've done enormous service as a nation, as a university, in getting 221,000 Syrian children in Lebanon. Important, but not enough. We've built roofs over their heads, including our award-winning Ghata clinic. But how do we really get to the fabric of building the next Syrian society? For me, it's alarming and even tragic to see tens and even hundreds of thousands of the young generation are at risk of losing their future, their culture, their mooring, their lives. This represents, in our view, the greatest concern for the future of Syria and of the Arab world. If these citizens do eventually go back and they haven't completed their education, what's the future for a country that is not exactly overflowing in natural resources? So rather than whine about it, what can we do as a nation? What can we do, more importantly, as a university? I think AUB as an institution has never shied away from serving its society. Since its establishment over 150 years ago, we can say that this month, AUB has always been about creating opportunities for all, for reaching out to the least fortunate. And we do it through advancing knowledge and science and the humanities, through transformative teaching, and through having responsive community services. So in this crisis, as well as in others, AUB has been at the forefront of being an engaged institute of higher education. We have filled that critical aspirational space of a university, of an entity that steps up, that doesn't wait to be drafted, in the words of the 60s and 70s. That's why I'm particularly grateful to our provost and associate provost, Dr. Yassin. It's very important to organize and collate your efforts. For me, it wasn't surprising to map 64 projects in AUB addressing various aspects of the Syrian refugee crisis. This is in our DNA, to respond to the needs of those least fortunate. These are all across the university, in every discipline, in every faculty, in every institute and center. To try to coalesce these efforts and build more synergy, the Office of the Provost has founded the AUB4Refugees initiative. This initiative is an umbrella program for all refugee-related work in the university. It's intended not to replace, but to assemble, to enable, and to empower. Paving the path for higher education for refugees and their host communities remains a high priority for us at AUB. This is something inculcated in me personally as a boy when I would take a couple of afternoons a week to teach those less fortunate, and I think this is something that has to remain in our DNA. We're tackling this through scholarships, innovating teaching methods, testing novel approaches to distance learning, as well as working with partners to improve basic and pre-university education. This is the AUB mission, and I'm very proud to see how people are realizing it here in every aspect of the university. From the medical center to arts and sciences, to the Sam Ferris Institute, to engineering, and so on and so forth. In fact, I truly believe that it is this level of what I'm going to call pragmatic and effectively applied idealism that led to our greatest gift last week in the Faculty of Engineering and Architecture from Maroon Saman, who I would characterize as a pragmatic idealist. So we thought of this forum as the launching event for the AUB4Refugees initiative, to create a platform where the engaged AUB faculty and staff will show the ways that they are addressing the impact of the Syrian refugee crisis on the refugees themselves, as well as on host communities. There are many great institutions in the world that are studying this crisis. We're one of a handful that are doing something about this crisis. So all the faculties, all the institutes, all the centers are represented here today. And they're represented by their leaders, by their stars, by individuals who don't have time to waste. Someone once said, you want to fix something, find a busy person who's too busy to do it and get them to help you. And that's what you have here in this room. This is much of the cream of our crop. And they're doing this on their own. There's no draft here. So equally important, I think, in giving people the opportunity to know what others are doing, this forum is a fantastic opportunity for dialogue and how synergies and efficiencies and partnerships can be built with our partners from the government, the United Nations, and civil society. And these are the people who've also jumped to rally to make a difference in this impact. And I have to say, I'm heartened to see that the Prime Minister has decided to make this a priority. It's important to fix a problem before the problem fixes you. We in Lebanon should certainly remember that. Fix the problem before the problem fixes you. So, in closing, I want to say, since its foundation 150 years ago, AUB has positioned itself at the heart of its society and as a leader in its community. Throughout the world wars, as well as through rounds of the seemingly never-ending civil war, AUB has remained strong and resilient, but flexible and open and giving throughout the storms. As the medical center served as the epicenter for responding to the mounting humanitarian needs, there are key studies of health needs of society, the humanism that came through from this campus that described an institution that was at the heart of a humanitarian and a violent storm is prepared to help in this storm. We really have to say that not a single faculty, institute, or center this time has hesitated to engage in responding to address the impact of the crisis. And this, my friends, is the greatest humanitarian crisis since the Second World War. This worldwide, global refugee crisis that some nations are choosing to deal with by acting like ostriches and thinking it's going to blow over is not blowing over. More significantly, I think the efforts here move beyond scholarship, move beyond community service, move beyond even engaged science and humanity. This is the core of what universities were built to address. The education, the empowerment, and the support of those least fortunate. I'm going to say this again and again and again over the years to come. Refugees, as well as the host communities, which are suffering tremendously under the pressure of an ailing economy and of a society that has not yet settled, need our support and they need hope. The most important thing that we at AUB can provide them with is hope. And AUB, I think, is offering such a narrative of hope for our refugees, that returning home and rebuilding their lives is attainable and possible, and that together we can get there. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. President. May I ask Mr. Ma'in Marabi, His Excellency, the Minister of State for Displaced Affairs and MP, to deliver his speech.
Good morning. President Khouri, Provost Kharajli, Dr. Mitri, Excellencies, Mr. Lazzarini, Mrs. Gerard, Dr. Bergloff, fellow alumni, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. It is an honor to be present among you today to launch the AUB4Refugees initiatives. It makes me proud to see that my university continues to be leading innovative initiatives that are in the best interest of our country. The Syrian crisis has left its toll on the Syrian people as well as the Lebanese community and Lebanon as a whole. We are all working towards the same aim. We all want the best interest of all affected communities. AUB has taken an excellent step to research deeply into topics of concern to everyone. You have a very rich agenda today, with a creative approach to topics from an academic, interdisciplinary perspective. AUB has started coordination from within. This is the type of work that we need in Lebanon to properly address our challenges. It is also that the Lebanese government has been doing throughout in response to this crisis in spite of all the challenges that we have been facing. During the past 6 years, Major work has been done in order to respond to this crisis. This effort was only possible because of the coordination amongst all relevant stakeholders, ministries, UN, agencies, donors, INGOs, NGOs, and local communities. Without this effort, Lebanon would not have survived an influx of 1.5 million Syrian individuals. It is an unprecedented crisis and unprecedented effort. However, we understand that much more is still needed. We understand that a lot is still missing. We also realize that there are important actors missing in this general coordination mechanism. This is where your role comes in. We believe that the academia has a crucial role to play in trying to help offset the impact of the crisis. This forum would be a first step toward a real and comprehensive partnership. And we believe that there are many interesting findings in your research that would be of great contribution to our work in the management of this crisis. Ladies and gentlemen, faced with severe political, economical, and social repercussions from the crisis, the Lebanese government has put this issue at the top of its priorities. We have taken the decision to address it through a unified policy and a comprehensive and well-prioritized strategy. This seriousness materialized in the first step of appointing a Minister of State for Displaced Affairs to focus only on proposing policy and strategies and coordination of the response. We are coming in with a positive approach and builds on the great effort that was put in the past years. We built on the Lebanon Crisis Response Plan, LCRP, and other important initiatives to coordinate with all relative stakeholders in order to continue addressing additional pressing needs. Friends, we returned from Support Syrians and the Region conference in Helsinki yesterday, where we reiterated to the world our commitment to this issue. We told them that we are doing our share in the best capacity we have, considering our very fragile situation. All this at the time when the funding received by Lebanon continues to be some of the lowest when taking into consideration the number of refugees per capita. As such, we have received even less than half the survival needs identified in our annual appeals. Now is the time to see some true sharing of responsibilities and burdens. The international community needs to step up to its promises and turn its concern and solidarity into actions. Not only that, the international community needs to also step up on the political level. The only true solution and answer to all the challenges of the displaced Syrians and the vulnerable host communities is for the war in Syria to end and for the suffering to stop. In the meantime, we all need to work together to respond better to the crisis at hand and to ensure the best interest of all. We are all in this together. It is a partnership which brings together a very wide range of expertise to achieve the best interest of all. In this respect, we see that the AUB4Refugees initiative is an exemplary model of fostering cooperation and building partnership on campus and beyond to deal with the effects of the refugee crisis. We hope to see more initiatives of this kind, and we encourage others to follow this path. Good luck to all. Good luck to all of you today, and we are looking forward for building on your work in all our future efforts, and thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Merabi. Now, I'd like to ask Mr. Philippe Lazzarini. Mr. Lazzarini is the resident coordinator and the humanitarian coordinator of the UN in Lebanon.
So, President Houri, Minister Merhabi, Excellencies, friends and colleagues, it's a great privilege to be here today to take part to this opening of this AUB forum on innovative response to the Syrian crisis. As it has been indicated, we enter the 7th year of the Syrian conflict. We more than ever need innovative solutions to respond to the stark humanitarian and socio-economic challenges both Syrian and host communities are confronted with. Despite the large-scale response on the way, Lebanon is stretched to its limit, and Syrian and Lebanese face deepening vulnerabilities and struggle to make ends meet. Poverty is on the rise. Since 2014, the number of people living with less than $2.4 has doubled to 1.2 million people, which means we have about 300,000 Lebanese and 70% of the Syrian refugees who are sinking deeper into the infernal cycle of debt. Despite all the advances made in terms of education, we still have 200,000 children out of the school system. Unemployment remains one of the most pressing issues, both for refugees and the Lebanese. Only 1 in 6 Syrian in the country is working, and families are increasingly turning into negative coping mechanisms like child marriage or child labor. Unemployment is also very high. I mean, for the Lebanese, reaching in some places like Tripoli, 35%. And we also know that the average of unemployment for the youth is 3 to 4 times higher than the average here in the country. So, President Houri, you are right to say that the Lebanese are certainly one of the most hospitable, people. Despite all these challenges, they have shown extraordinary solidarity, and they have opened the door, to their schools, to their hospitals, and to their villages. As you indicated, the estimate is 1.5 million, refugee Syrian here in the country. However, what we know 6 years later, host communities cannot shoulder this burden alone and indefinitely. More than ever, we need to redouble our effort, and when the we is also the international community here, in order to prevent host community fatigue by finding new solutions and new way to sustainably support Lebanon. The international community has shown solidarity and has mobilized over the last few years $4.8 billion in humanitarian assistance, and if we look only last year, it was $1.6 billion. It seems little compared to the impact of the crisis, but if we look at the overarching humanitarian system, $1.6 billion is more than 10% of the worldwide humanitarian assistance being channeled only to Lebanon. However, this support has not been enough to turn the tide of refugees deepening poverty and vulnerability. Despite all this effort, since 2014, the people in poverty has doubled. Needs are outpacing donor funding, and there are strong indications that this humanitarian support has reached a ceiling. We did not get much more in terms of humanitarian assistance in 2016 than in 2015. And we enter a protracted situation, which means most likely this ceiling might not even be sustainable in the future. The more protracted the crisis in Lebanon becomes, the more innovative and creative we have to be in order to genuinely make a difference. And on this, I definitely welcome this initiative, since we are looking at being innovative. Let me elaborate on different way of what this means in practice when it comes to, I would say, overall approach in the way we are dealing with the crisis. First of all, we need to have a holistic approach while addressing the crisis. This means not only responding to urgent needs in isolation, but combining life-saving assistance and longer-term responses that address the country's security and socio-economic challenges. We need to work together to reinforce the self-reliance of Syrian refugees and help them build the skills they will need once they will return, to the country. But at the same time, we have to support Lebanon in reversing its economic decline by investing in key productive sectors, modernizing the country infrastructure, and encouraging key structural reform. We know that the crisis is not the source of all the problem in the country. They have amplified pre-existing unaddressed issues here in Lebanon. This would not only allow the country to better deal with the impact of the crisis, but it would make it an anchor for stability and a driver for reconstruction in the region. Secondly, we have also to address efficiency while delivering support. It is not only about delivering support, but delivering better. As such, for the past years in Lebanon, we have increased the amount of support provided through direct cash. Not only this approach reinforces the condition of the people the most in need and let them define what their priorities are, but it also benefits the local economy. Last year only, through cash-based assistance, we have invested $400 million in the economy, which has benefited directly to local markets, stores, and producers alike. Thirdly, finding creative funding sources is a necessity at a time humanitarian assistance is reaching its limit. The recently established concessional financing facility for the region is one example of such innovation, which makes large-scale financing facilities at concessional loan available for a country which traditionally would not have access to this type of facilities, because Lebanon is a middle-income country. And that's certainly also a way to broaden the scope of the resources to be made available. This forum is an opportunity to share insights and to pull together innovative ideas. Lebanon is a fertile soil for innovation and new approaches. Indeed, it is a hugely resourceful country, capable, I believe, of a major transformation if all its resources, natural, financial, and particularly human, beyond the generosity, Lebanese are famous to be extraordinarily skilled people. I keep saying, by the way, to colleagues, wherever you go in the world, whatever sector you refer to, you will always find a Lebanese among the top 5 or top 10. So the skills are here, and I do believe AUB is one of the reasons why this skill is so present. So we need this to pull together, but ultimately it needs to be supported by political will. Without the political will, we will go nowhere. I'm encouraged to see dynamic initiative on the way right now, such as the Hult Prize, which is partnering with AUB for the first time this year for its 2017 challenge on refugees, reawakening human potential. This competition is challenging students from over 100 countries to craft bold new business models to restore the right and dignity of refugees around the world. And I, like many of you in this room, am looking forward to seeing the result of this competition. The key to innovation is partnership. Academia, as it is shown in this room today, academia, government, NGO, civil society, business, all have unique ideas and assets to bring to the tables, and we will be most effective if we work together across field, discipline, and area of expertise. AUB, as one of the foremost universities in the Middle East, is uniquely placed to bring together these partners to drive forward innovative solutions. I look forward to learning about the outcome of this forum. I believe today's meeting could be the launch pad for many good initiatives that could be game changer, not just, for Lebanon, but could also be game changer in the way we are doing business in a crisis setting. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Lazzarini. I'd like to ask Ms. Mireille Girard. Ms. Girard is the UNHCR representative in Lebanon to give us her speech.
Thank you. I was joking with Philippe that probably the first row cannot see me. I think this podium is not made for average Mediterranean side women. So if you would allow me, I'll try to express myself through the microphone, even if you can't see me. Minister Merhabi, who I'll try to see now, President Houri, distinguished guests and colleagues. It's a great privilege for me to be addressing this group today and to be in this prestigious institution with whom UNHCR has a very close relationship at various levels. Many departments of AUB are working very closely with UNHCR, not least the Islam Fares Institute. So I'm very grateful for being part of that team effort and team discussion today. You spoke about an innovative initiative. Innovation is at the heart of UNHCR, of the humanitarian community at large, but UNHCR in Lebanon is placing a great emphasis on that. So we very much look forward to defining the ideas that will come up, already the presentation, but also the thoughts it will provoke among the students and the teachers and the audience coming from outside today. We won't see the 64 projects, but we'll see a number of them, and we're very much looking forward. I have my team in the room listening carefully and looking forward to working together on putting them in practice or working together on seeing how they progress. Now, why is innovation important for refugees? We have passed the phase of massive response. As you all know, it was presented by various speakers so far. We have faced here in Lebanon a massive influx of refugees over the past few years, particularly the first years between 2011, 12, 13, 14 was the peak of the arrival. So we had to respond massively quantitatively. Now that the crisis is stabilizing, we're getting into a more protracted situation. Now is the time to look into quality of response and to really deepen the quality of what we are doing. We've put quantity systems in place, and now we have to reflect on the quality of what we are doing, constantly pushing the parameters of effectiveness, and that we can do together. We can do better. We can constantly do better, and with people. And I was very pleased to hearing the President's statement about how people, the refugees themselves, are resources to tap. They want to be part of their fate, what is happening to them, and we can work together with the refugees to bring all the maximum of these resources that we collectively have together. So the involvement of people is really important. We are privileged to have refugees studying in these universities and a number of universities in Lebanon, together with very talented Lebanese students. All that is precious resource that we really need to tap. We need to think to think of new ways, to think out of the box. We have sometimes, mechanisms of response. We know how to do water, we know how to do sanitation, we know how to do health. But perhaps we need to look at them differently and constantly so that we see if there is not another way to do things better and to do more with the same amount of money, if not less. Streamlining the cost is also something we need to look at now, to constantly streamline, save costs, save layers, so that we can maximize the resources that are put at our disposal. So what have we done so far in the humanitarian response? There's a number of innovations that are already in place that have been used. For example, and I'll give just one example that was done recently between various UN agencies and very talented startups in Lebanon. We did a hackathon, what we call a hackathon, to get at the initiative of young talented people from civil society who proposed to bring together for 48 hours, young Lebanese entrepreneurs really motivated to do things. We put them challenges and we told them, we don't have the ultimate truth. We humanitarians think we know how we do things, but we very much welcome thoughts from outside and to think things differently and to bring your perspective to the issues. So this young group was put together for 48 hours. They blocked themselves in a room and thought, we put them some humanitarian challenge. We explained the number of things we do, in vaccination, in shelter, in communication with communities, etc. And we put these challenges to them and asked them to look into how can they innovate in this regard? What more can they bring? What more new ideas? What prototypes can they develop to help us in the humanitarian response? And a lot of good ideas came up. There were prizes distributed. One of them particularly putting sensors in shelters to monitor the temperature to see how effective the isolation is that we are as humanitarians putting into the shelter of people. See if it's efficient, if people are using the heating properly, and if we can do better in our response in terms of shelter and winter support. So that was with the private sector. Why not with the academic institution? Let's challenge each other to do this kind of really hackathon in the context of academic institution. We certainly should think about that in the year to come with the talented students of this university and those of other universities in Beirut. The other technology being used, we do sponge maps, maps that try to capture all the different information we have from different databases and put them and geolocalize them in a location. So you're looking at one location, you try to see which are all the programs that are applied in that particular location, by whom, when, how many people they affect. So IT technology, shelter technology, communication technology, there's a lot of elements that can then be put at the service of better humanitarian response. How can academic institutions such as AUB help in this process? Certainly what academic institutions bring is some distance. We're all very busy in action every day, and you can bring some distance, some reflection, some perspective to issues. Academic institutions have more time than we have as humanitarians to do research, sit back and research, assess, analyze all the data existing in this, and drill further into the analysis and put that analysis at the service of the operational response. Testing prototypes, developing prototypes and testing them. This is also something that certainly academic institutions can bring to the humanitarian response. Cross-fertilization between action and research. Constantly. It's a two-way relationship. While academic institutions can bring the research and the prototypes to the humanitarian response, humanitarian responders can constantly feedback the impact of this methodology and the new findings in the field to feed into the academic research. It's really a symbiosis between the two sectors. We could try to build networks of innovators. UNHCR and I'm sure other agencies as well have fellows every year, innovators that we identify all over the world and help them push their new ideas. I'm sure there are such personalities also in AUB. We could put everyone in contact, and across different operations of the world, they could constantly be in contact and push their idea and dialogue to make their ideas at the benefit of various humanitarian operations in the world. And then finally, really the beauty of humanitarian institution, of academic institution, and President, you mentioned it, Minister, you mentioned it, and Philip, you did mention it as well. It's pooling expertise at the service of common values that we all share. It's human rights of people. So I would like to thank you very much for putting your expertise and your experience and your dynamism at the service of those who need it very critically. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Girard. Now, last but not least, Dr. Eric Bergloff. I'd like to ask him to come to stage. Dr. Bergloff is the director of the Institute for Global Affairs at the London School of Economics. But we're actually partnering with the Institute as part of an alliance called the Alliance of Leading Universities on Migration. And AUB has joined as the first university outside Europe to be part of this network, alum network. Eric.
Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, friends, thank you very much for inviting us to AUB. For me, it's the first time, and you know, I've over the years heard so much about this institution, and it's fantastic to walk on its grounds. It's truly beautiful and also very inspiring. So I would like to express my sincere thanks to the kind invitation from President Houri and from Hala Mustashib and from, of course, our friend Dr. Nasser Yassin. It's a great pleasure for us to be here. So as Nasser was saying, I'm directing an Institute of Global Affairs at the London School of Economics. And it has a rather unique mandate. It's about connecting researchers at institutions in Western capitals, across advanced economies, to researchers in emerging economies, and really bringing out that knowledge, that experience that exists in this part of the world. And we have seen that emerging economies are taking or producing more than half of the world's total output. They represent 2/3 of the population. But when you look at the global debate, their voice is not heard as much as it could be, and it's now becoming it's becoming very important to get a more balanced global debate, that we get more input from these countries. So I'm actually here representing a broader community of researchers, the Alliance of Leading Universities for Migration, ALUM. So it's a network of researchers at the European universities so far, but we have also now included several universities in this region, and key among them is the American University of Beirut. It was the first of these universities to join, and I want to congratulate President Houri and particularly Nasser for making this happen. Let me say a few words about ALUM. So we created ALUM in the autumn of 2015, when we saw this massive inflow of refugees into the European Union. So this was, of course, something that you had already lived with for some time. We created in the conviction that migration-related issues were challenges faced both by Europe and by the Middle East. They were just too big to be handled by fragmented individual research. We needed to cooperate much more. And what we particularly saw, and you have, of course, acutely aware of this very large and in many cases widening gap between, on the one hand, the facts, the research, the analysis, and on the other hand, the public debates. And as we saw this widening gap, we said we have to do something about this, and we have to try to bring in more evidence-based research into the public debate. And we thought that by pooling evidence, experience from lead researchers and inform policymakers throughout Europe, but also in this region, and of course also bring this into the global institutions, into the G7, G20, and at the EU levels, this could help reduce this very dangerous gap. So now, during a little more than a year of alum's existence, we have held 3 major conferences, one in Sicily, one in London, and one in Mannheim just at the end of last year. We have met with policymakers both at the central level, at the national level, at the local levels, and the founding member universities soon recognized that we need to reach out and extend alum to researchers and universities in this region. As I said, the American University of Beirut was the first among the first, and Dr. Nasser Yassin was very much in the lead of that process. And his presentation at the conference in Mannheim last November clearly illustrated how fundamentally important it is for researchers from this region to be part of the debate. Unfortunately, I couldn't be there myself, but I have seen videos and I have talked to colleagues. He changed the terms of the debate and brought in a much more nuanced view and shift the perspective, which was, I think, very important and influenced people over there, both researchers and policymakers. So when we formed this alum, we called around to universities and we saw how much was actually happening on the ground, how universities gave up lecture halls to house refugees, how students were taking initiatives, collecting used bikes, building contact centers for refugees, collecting toys and so on. Universities were doing so much more than they usually do. Of course, we're trying to open up universities for teaching and for help scholars at risk and so on, but it's really much more. And I think here is where our desire to bring in universities like AUB into the discussion is that when we first started talking to Nasser, we really realized how much is really happening at AUB. That AUB could really be a leader and an illustration of how much universities really can do. When LSE was formed, actually 30 years after AUB, it was very much formed in that spirit, to be part of dealing with social issues, with poverty, with people at risk. And it's in that tradition that LAMIC goes on, but also that we are now developing. We actually have 3 joint research initiatives with AUB, and we're also working on a broader initiative to really look at how universities can open up, reach out, and be part of the dealing with the refugee crisis. And the word innovation has come up several times already, but I really think that AUB is such a hotbed and a kind of incubator for ideas around how universities can reach out and open up to refugees. So it's very much in that spirit that we are here today to learn and to engage and to build on the experience that we have in this region. So once again, thank you very much for inviting us. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Bergloff. I would like to thank you all. Thank you, President Khouri. Thank you, Mr. Merabi. Thank you, Mr. Lazzarini. Thank you, Ms. Girard. Thank you, Dr. Bergloff, for the opening. We'll now go for 20 minutes of break, and then we will convene back in the sessions. We'll start with the first session, looking into how AUB academics and centers and departments are looking into vulnerabilities and how they're actually intervening in this regard. Thank you very much.